the Western world, painting and writing are in general seen as distinct disciplines of practice. Although both can be creative in nature, and there are definitely contemporary artists who create text-based art, in most of Western history, the practice of writing has never really been a major player in the visual arts. This is not so much the case in other parts of the world. For millennia, as well as today, the art of calligraphy is a major artistic practice in many East Asian countries such as China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Today, we're going to focus specifically on the history of Chinese calligraphy. Historically in China, many artists who painted picturesque scenes would have also been trained in the art of calligraphy. And artists would often write lines of poetry or prose along the sides of their painted scenes. In fact, during some historical periods, painting was often seen as a secondary practice compared to the prestigious practice of calligraphy. The primary reason the visual arts and the practice of writing are so closely linked in Chinese culture is due to the fact that the written characters themselves are pictograph-based. When one writes a Chinese character, they are essentially drawing an abstracted picture. Thus, through the art of calligraphy, Chinese writers and poets were not only able to express their creativity and personalities through the meanings of the words they wrote, but also in the forms and the brushstrokes of the words themselves. The Chinese form of writing, often referred to as characters or ideograms, are composed of usually square-shaped symbols, each representing a word or meaning. They evolved from an ancient pictograph-based language that was abstracted and simplified over time. For example, during the Chinese Bronze Age, the Shang Dynasty, roughly around 1400 BCE, the character for horse pretty much looked like this. Over time, it was standardized to fit into a square ratio. Then it was abstracted even further, and the modern symbol for horse looks like this. The basic tools that are generally used by Chinese calligraphers are black ink or ink sticks, inkstones, brush, traditional calligraphy paper, and sometimes also a paperweight, seal, and red seal paste. We will cover more of what the materials are used for as well as their history in the next episode. So there are a lot of formal rules regarding how to properly write a Chinese character as well as how to use traditional calligraphy methods, such as how to properly grind the ink you're using and how to properly hold a brush. Basically, for every single character, the stroke has to be written in a particular sequence. So not only do you have to remember how to write the thousands of commonly used Chinese characters, you also have to remember the sequence of brushstrokes go in for every single character. Seriously, compared to that, English class was a breeze. When writing these words, the creativity and personality comes from qualities such as stroke thickness, light and dark contrast, the amount of ink used, the pressure of the hand, speed, motion, and the texture of the brushstroke. It also takes a lot of practice to learn proper control of the brush and ink, since Chinese black ink is a really tricky medium to work with. For those of you who haven't tried to paint with traditional black ink, you may think, oh, it shouldn't be that hard to make a stroke on a piece of paper, but believe me when I say it's not easy. Most people's first attempt in using it usually involves getting ink everywhere, not being able to make straight lines at all, and just having ink basically bleed all over the page. Or maybe it was just me. So when an artist finishes a calligraphy work, they would seal it in red. This effectively acts as a signature. Seals are not only used by artists, but they were also used by emperors, courts, families, and basically any organization or person that wanted to identify itself. Over the years, this art form has become more than just works done on paper. In the early 1990s, a small street phenomenon called dishu, meaning ground calligraphy or street calligraphy, began in a park in Beijing and eventually grew into this huge urban phenomenon that swept through the entire country. It's where anonymous calligraphers would just show up in city squares, streets, and parks with these huge brushes and sometimes even mops, using water as ink and the pavement as paper, and would paint these huge characters, words, poems, or other literary works right on the ground, creating these beautiful and ephemeral performances of linguistic and visual expression. Some of you may ask, is it possible to appreciate Chinese calligraphy without knowing how to read Chinese? I certainly think so. I think anyone can appreciate the beauty of the stunning line work, the sharp and bold black strokes, contrasted with the glistening red seals. Appreciating the style, meticulousness, and the control of the calligraphic stroke is in a way very similar to appreciating the brushstrokes of an impressionist painting. You may not read Chinese, but we can all read picture. So can you think of other examples of creative uses of words or languages in visual art, whether it's Eastern art or Western art? Let me know in the comments.